Welcome to my channel, everyone. My name is Tim Russell. I'm the president of the Hyperpreterism Honorary Doctorates and Other Funny Stuff Research Institute in Ardmore, Alabama. And my research institute don't have as many books behind me as Don does, but uh, I've got a few toy cars. Yeah, I've got a few of that, but my main hobby is the music, as some of y'all know, and but anyway, I wanted to go back over this video Preston did where he claims God cannot violate the laws of physics. And that's why there won't be a resurrection of the dead, because God can't violate his own laws and raise the dead. Don claims we're made of atoms, and those atoms can't be regenerated in us because we share the atoms of no telling what of the past. And I say, who cares? And so what? How many atoms are in the universe, Don? I mean, you're a physicist, and you know the mathematical calculations and all of that. So who told God he has to use the same atoms to reconstitute a living organism? Did he not breathe life into man to begin? Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 15 that what is planted is not what is resurrected. There's a spiritual body, there's a physical body. There's going to be a resurrection that you deny, and I'm going to prove that with his own words, folks. He denies there's a resurrection, bodily resurrection. Whatever that body is, Don denies there's a resurrection because God cannot violate the laws of physics. I mean, it's really, he's supposed to be a scholar, folks. He's supposed to have a doctorate. He's supposed to be a theologian and all this. And he references scholars and the scholarly scholarship that he is involved in. And Don, so just makes such a elementary mistake saying God cannot violate the laws of physics. And I'm going to play it, don't get excited. But what brought this back up is I was watching Mike Sullivan, Don gossip and laugh and yuck it up about other people like Sam Frost. And, they talk about, I mean this with all due respect, but, and then they'll go to trash talking. And I know I do my share of it, but I do it I get ill. But I hear Don, here's the thing. Here's what brought this back up. I was watching their show, Mike and Don's Gossip Fest last night, and this lady named Carolyn, uh, I had posted a question. What can Don? I knew they weren't going to answer it, and Mike probably blocked me off his YouTube channel. I said, "What can God do since He cannot violate the laws of physics? What can He do?" Folks, if God is limited like we are, then we can those Kenneth Copelands and all them that talk about the little gods doctrine, they may be right. If God is limited like we are, what stops us from saying, well, we are God? Don't that was such a ridiculous, and in scholarly terms, the word is stupid. You know, to make such a stupid mistake. But he don't believe it's a mistake. Don stands by this. He's not backing down. Carolyn said, Don misspoke. He didn't mean that. Yes, he did mean this, folks. But it's like I told her. She just kept on talking about, well, what about this? What about that? What? Yeah, God can do miracles. I'm not saying God can't violate the laws of physics. Don is. And God can do what he wants to. He's the creator of the universe. He's the creator of however many universes there are. He's the creator of them. And we don't even know how many universes there are. And Don wants to talk about The number of atoms, it's a number that we can't calculate. And Don says, well, they can't be, bodies can't be constituted. I mean, it's just stupid, folks. That is a ridiculous argument to go against the resurrection. The the Bible is plain and it's clear in its understanding. We don't need Don's Hebraic thought and scholarship to understand what the Bible is talking about when it's talking about there's coming a resurrection. He says Jesus never, and this is the word I hate for prophecy or prophesy, folks, is prediction. Well, so be it. Don says Jesus never predicted a resurrection of all uh, dead bodies, and uh, folks, yes, he did. He Jesus said there's going to be a resurrection of the just and the unjust, and he's going to separate the sheep from the goats, which is the evil from the righteous. Yes, Jesus did predict that. If you want to use the word prediction, Don has no fear of Jesus. He refers to him as a 5'5" Jewish man riding on the clouds, so that says it all there. But I want to replay Don here for a little bit, just a few minutes. Bear with it. He's talking about Hymenaeus and Philetus. He uses those two heretics that Paul called them heretics. Don uses them to say his idea of the resurrection is past. They just had the timing wrong, not the type of resurrection. So if you want to follow Don and Mike Sullivan and all of those heretics, go right ahead. They follow the heretics, Hymenaeus and Philetus, the two that were in the Bible that talked about the resurrection is past already. And Don says, "Well, how could they have said that if they were wrong on the type of resurrection?" Well, Don, you're wrong on the type of resurrection. You're wrong on that. You're wrong on the timing. You're wrong on all of it. You're a heretic because you deny the common resurrection. You are a heretic because you denied God had the power to raise his son's dead body from the grave. You don't even see that. You say God cannot raise the dead because he cannot violate the laws of physics. Well, he raised his son. His son raised Lazarus. I mean, what is wrong with you? Why do you even consider yourself a Christian? You're not following Christ. You're following your own idea, your own fables, your own, I don't know what it is, but you're so tied up and jealous of the true scholars. You constantly refer to the scholars as if that's who we follow. We don't follow them, Don. We don't follow scholars. We follow the Bible, the Word. Sanctify them by your Word. Your Word is truth. That's in John 17, a chapter of John that you do not even know exists. I have pointed that out on your ridiculous challenge of Christ. You haven't read the book of John. You never have. You won't even read one verse, John 10:37. But anyway, folks, before I make this too long, I want to prove to you, you build your foundation on the idea, the concept of God, the deity of God, as being limited to the laws of physics. Once you have that foundation, everything built on that is a deck of cards. It's a house of cards, whatever you call it. It falls. If God cannot, He's the creator. If He cannot violate what we call laws, I don't even know if God calls them laws. He just spoke this universe into existence. Whatever God calls them. Don says he can't violate the laws of physics. The laws of physics that men have come up with to to explain their the world around them. That's what physics does, folks. It explains what we can know. It explains it. And if you really wanted to get into it, you could try to understand some quantum mechanics that tells us one atom can be in an unlimited universes in an unlimited time. It can be everywhere all at once. An atom. That's what quantum mechanics is telling us, that something can be everywhere at once. It's kind of above my head, but that's what they do, folks. They predict where something's going to be, and but at the same time, it can be everywhere. And here Don is, well, according to the laws of physics. Get a grip, Don. You're an old auto mechanic like I am. Well, I don't know if you even know how to work on a car. I believe you get everybody else to do it. But this kind of stuff just drives me batty, folks. This lady last night watching that live show, and me and her was the only ones that were posting on it. And she was telling me that, well, Don didn't mean that. Yes, he did mean. I'm fixing to play it again. He did mean it, and he still stands by it. God cannot violate the laws of physics. He can't square the circle. Who would have thought that God was worried about? Why should we worry about whether or not God can square a circle, Don? Good grief. How ridiculous.
Well, to be honest about it, Dr. Ortland never commented on Second Thessalonians chapter 2 in his very first video. If he did, I missed.
Second Thessalonians chapter 2, was Paul's telling them to, well, yeah, you go to it, read it for yourself. Second Thessalonians chapter 2. But I want to get to where he's talking about God cannot violate the laws of physics, because atoms and the light and whatever, the wind.
Regain, regather my atoms
Okay, here we
from
go.
who knows how many millions of people that they are dispersed to.
That's it. But that was a video I had clipped this out of. I didn't mean to leave it on. That was, let me go back to his and give a broader context of it.
Missed it. And I thought it strange at the time that I listened and viewed it. I thought it strange that he did not deal with that text. Because after all, folks, the day of the Lord, the parousia of Christ, and the resurrection are synchronous events.
Not necessarily. No, not there's many days of the Lord that don't have anything to do with the resurrection. They're not synchronistic. Come up with whatever word you want to. No, it doesn't necessarily mean there is going to be a day of the Lord that will involve the resurrection and judgment. But that hadn't got here yet. The day of the Lord, when Jerusalem was sacked and the temple destroyed, that's a different day of the Lord. The disciples in Matthew 24 that dawned them, this is their chapter. Daniel 9, Matthew 24, and certain verses in Revelation, that's what they do. When the disciples asked him these questions, and as he's telling them these Matthew 24, verse 1. Let me start there. Jesus went out from the temple and was going on his way, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. I don't know what that was. But he answered and said to them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon the other that shall not be thrown down. Okay, that Jesus is prophesying this temple is going to go down. No problem. That does not say nothing about a resurrection. And as he sat down on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, When shall these things be? And, in math, and means plus. And what shall be the sign of thy coming? And plus the end of the world. This is King James. No, this is American Standard Version. That's a very popular translation. New King James and other translations call it age and the end of the age. Young's calls it the. Let's go to Young's right quick. He's the word for word that they like to use for mellow. The Young's literal. What is the sign of thy presence and of the full end of the age? That is more along the lines of end of the world, not the Jewish age. They claim this means the end of the Jewish age. No, it doesn't. It means the end of the world. That's what it means. The full end of the age. The full end. They say, well, the Jewish the covenant wasn't done till the end of the till the end of the age, until 8070. That's when the hyper preterists claim that's when it was complete. In 8070. No, the resurrection will come at the end of the world, as King James. King James is a good translation. I like the New King James myself. It uses the end of the age. Young's is closer to this because it calls it the full end of the age. This carnal age, folks, that we live in, this physical age, will come to an end. 2 Peter 3 tells us about it. All the elements will be burned up. The world was once destroyed by a flood. This time it's going to be destroyed by fire. Not just Jerusalem, not just the temple, the world. And Don and these hyper preterists say saying it's all synchronistic. No, it's not. There was many. The day of the Lord, that was a day of the Lord in 8070. He came. That was a judgment against Jerusalem, but the law had already ended, folks. So the law was not in effect. The temple was just a building standing there. It had no uh, standing. It had no power. It was the church was was being spread. It was the temple. The church is the temple. Paul taught that. The church is the temple of God. Long before, at least 40 or from day of Pentecost on, we know the church was the temple. And they claim no, the temple didn't come till after AD 70. That ain't what Paul said. uh, the temple. We are the temple. God dwells in us, the Holy Spirit, the Son. We all have the mind of Christ. We're supposed to. That's the temple.
Are they not?
No, they know what?
Where are you going to delineate between?
They're not. They're not. That's where he said they're synchronistic. No, not necessarily. Uh, when he returns, yeah, they'll be synchronistic when he returns. That's what he's coming back for. He's coming for his church. 1 Corinthians 15, talking about the resurrection and what body will it be. And Don's saying, well, Hymenaeus and Phileas had the type of resurrection. Don's now preaching it's some kind of ongoing. When Paul says there's going to be a resurrection, well, it was ongoing. But that's not what Paul says. Paul doesn't say the resurrection is an ongoing thing. He teaches that baptism, we are baptized into his death to rise and walk a new life. That's a type of that's Jesus called it being born again. And then we're going to be resurrected one day. The church that's alive at the time he returns will be transformed from that mortal to immortality. And the dead in Christ will rise first, and uh, those of us who are alive and remain, all of that's a resurrection. What we went through is you can saying, put off the old man to rise and walk a new one. Jesus called it, you must be born again. You know, that's what we are. That's the church, the temple, are born again Christians. Don is now, he started out, it was resurrection is a covenantal thing. The old promises made to old covenant Israel being fulfilled. And, you know, he's on the verge of atheism, Israel only doctrine now. And he has a confusing doctrine. You never know what he's talking about, but what he's calling a resurrection, is it a resurrection or is it a covenantal changing? You know, you never know what he's going to teach next. But when he, like I said, his foundation is God is limited to what he can do. And so there can't be a resurrection of dead bodies because God can't do that, is what Don says. And so when you build your foundation around that, you got to come up with something besides a resurrection that the Bible talks about. Because if God can't do it, it's impossible. Therefore, you got to change what the Bible's saying. You got to change the meaning of it.
Between them. But instead, he goes Second Timothy chapter 2, 17 and 18, where Hymenaeus and Philetus were saying that the resurrection had already taken place. And by teaching that when they did, they were overthrowing the faith of some.
And that's what the hyper-preterists today teach, that the resurrection is past already. And Don says, well, no, it's he's saying Paul didn't rebuke them for the type of resurrection. The timing is what he was rebuking them on. No, it's not. He's rebuking them for the type of resurrection. And I got a verse pulled up that I kind of think that where Hymenaeus and Philetus got their idea from, but I'll read it to you in just a minute. Let me hear Don just a little bit more.
Now, my question for you to consider, ladies and gentlemen, as I posed in one of my very first videos, if the resurrection, if the day of the Lord is an earth burning, time ending event,
it is,
in which every human being who has ever died, gone into the ground or gone into the sea, decomposed, been consumed by wild animals. If the day of the Lord and the resurrection is when every single human being who has ever experienced death and decay is suddenly miraculously raised out of the grave, out of the dirt, out of the water, their bodies, their atoms are reconstituted, let's face it. This is not simply a statement of skepticism. You have to understand, this is a legitimate question of concern. Chrysostom tried to deal with it centuries and centuries ago. Since every human being's body is composed of atoms that have been recycled and recycled and recycled and recycled, how is it that God is going to, after I'm dead and decayed, how is it that God's going to regather my atoms from who knows how many millions of people that they are dispersed to?
Billions, not millions.
And put them back into my body, when my body is made up of atoms and molecules of all of these preceding people who have died and decayed. And I've had people, when I ask this question, simply say, oh, well, you're questioning the power of God. I'm questioning purely physics. There are certain things that God can't do. He can't make a round square. He cannot make a square circle. Those are his own laws.
Everyone, you catch that, folks. And let me mute this right quick.
Wonder why so many people say they want to learn guitar, but very few actually learn to play? It's simple. Too many people try to learn
So the question here is very sincere.
And so he can't explain how God's going to do that. What man can? No one's tried to explain how God's going to raise the dead. No one's ever. We all know that's going to be a miraculous event that only He knows how He's. How did He speak the universe into existence? We don't know. And this is really stupid. That's the scholarly term is stupid. It reminds me when Paul, I think it's Acts 17, when he was talking to the Greeks and he preached to them God and said, He is the unknown God. That that monument you have to the unknown God, let me tell you about Him. And he preached to them Jesus. And at the end, when he was, some believed. But when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, they felt like it was foolishness. And that's the hyperpreterist attitude, folks. The resurrection of the dead. If you got to believe it's reconstituted bodies and all this, uh, then it's just too much for them. That's too much foolishness for Don K. Preston to take. That's why he's a hyperpreterist in the first place. That's why most of them are. And that's why most hyperpreterists end up being Israel only or atheists. They don't stay long. A lot of them come right back out of it. Sam Frost did. Roderick Edwards did. Lance Conley did. Several on the internet that got into this. Then they saw how stupid it is. They got back out of it. But then a lot of them, Tristan Gabriel, different other ones, that Mark White, they got involved in it and they just become full blown atheists. It's foolishness to them, to these who stay with it or go into atheism and Israel only and all that. Uh, Don can't believe in a resurrection, a bodily resurrection. But like I said, folks, read 1 Corinthians 15. We don't know what kind of body it is. I do believe we will recognize our bodies or each other, whatever. However God does it, I don't know. I don't care. I'm just looking forward to the resurrection. But they have nothing to look forward to. But he's so stuck up on this that he's now saying God cannot violate the laws of physics. That's his foundation. You go from there, there's nowhere to go but down. Now that's just the truth of it. Let's hear just a little bit more from him.
Sure.
And I'm going to show you why I believe. Now, I ain't saying this for sure. Why I believe they taught the resurrection was past.
How could anybody believe? How could anybody convince? If I were to knock on your door one day and I were to say, I want to tell you something. The day of the Lord was yesterday. I want to tell you something. The resurrection of the dead was yesterday.
Or you could say, I want to tell you something, and then put that smirk on your face like Don did. The resurrection was 2,000 years ago. Almost. But he's fixing to get to Hymenaeus and Philetus, so let me shut up.
you,
Yeah.
you would go, yeah, bye.
Exactly. People who study the scriptures, who want to know what we're supposed to do, Christians who want to know what we're what's expected of us, what God wants of us, and all this, we're going to look at you and laugh, Don, and say, "Yeah, bye," because you're teaching a Hymenaeus and Philetus type heretical doctrine that the resurrection is past. And I've got a feeling I know why they did. And they got a better excuse than you do, actually. I think this is my opinion, folks. You don't have to, I'm going to use the Bible to show you why I believe it, what I believe, but you make up your own minds. But the resurrection is not what Don says it is, some kind of covenantal, ongoing process that never ends. I think that's what he's. I don't know what he's teaching anymore. He used to say it was a covenantal. The It was the resurrection of covenantal Israel into the new covenant. I mean, something like that. Whatever.
Door slammed in my face.
There's an idea.
So, how is it possible for Hymenaeus and Philetus to convince anybody that the day of the Lord had already taken place?
Okay, let me show you why I believe that, folks. In Matthew 27, I'm going to begin at Matthew 27, verse 45. Now, from the 6th hour until the 9th hour, there was darkness over the land. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. I can't read that, folks. I can't pronounce those words. I can read it, but I can't pronounce it. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? He was on the cross. Some of those who stood there when they heard that said, the man is calling for Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran and took a sponge, filled it with sour wine, and put it on a reed and offered it to him to drink. The rest said, leave him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come and save him. Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. Then, behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked and the rock split. To me, that was the sign right there of the new covenant coming. The veil of the temple was ripped from heaven to earth. It was ripped from top to bottom. The old law meant nothing anymore. It was exposed. And the graves were open. And this is where I believe Hymenaeus and Philetus were teaching that the day of the Lord had come. The temple veil being ripped and the graves opening, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, after Jesus' resurrection, and coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. See, folks, that's where I think, and I may be wrong, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know. I think that's where Hymenaeus and Philetus got their doctrine from. But they weren't following the scriptures. They weren't following the apostles' doctrine. They were just, okay, we're going to jump on this and run with this. And coming out of the graves after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. So when the centurion, I don't know what that was, my phone's talking to me. My phone was talking to me, folks, waiting on my instructions. So when the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they feared greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. Now, why after his resurrection and that they were at the cross, and then why it's stuck in there at verse 53, I don't know. But it's kind of all jumbled together there. And it's why they believed that he was the Son of God. They kind of remembering, yeah, they's dead. They come after his resurrection. Here they come, the dead saints, some of the dead saints. Many, it says, many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. I have always thought, could that be why Hymenaeus and Philetus taught that the resurrection had passed? We've already seen that. The day of the Lord has come. The veil was ripped from the temple. There was a great earthquake. Uh, that's my opinion, and I'm sticking to it for now, unless y'all can convince me otherwise. To me, it's much better than saying God cannot violate the laws of physics. Who violated the laws of physics when these dead bodies of the saints come out of the graves and went walking into the Jerusalem. Now, today, many people mock that and call it zombies. But suppose these people, many saw them, I'm sure, they went into Jerusalem. And don't you know that spooked a lot of people? Here comes cousin so and so, sister so and so, brother so and so. That was for the Bible not to say much about that. That was a powerful event right there. You catch the power of it, Don? That maybe that's where Hymenaeus and Philetus got their doctrine from, that the resurrection had passed. They weren't talking about some unknown state of mind resurrection. I don't think. I think they were talking about these dead bodies that come out of the graves when the veil was ripped to the temple that separated the holy of holies from the rest of the world. And that's my opinion. That's what I think. But I'm not dogmatic like you are, Don, and saying God cannot violate the laws of physics. And I said last night to that woman Carolyn, I said, many people, I've been saying on my channel that many people follow Don, that it does not matter what he says, they will defend him and just blasphemy and heretical words, just accept what he says. Oh, he misspoke. No, he didn't misspeak. It's kind of like Kenneth Copeland uh, destroyed COVID-19, and people still follow him. John Hagee, he wrote a book in defense of Israel, claiming Jesus did not come to be the Messiah, said he would prove with his book that Jesus never presented himself to be the Messiah. So how could the Jews have rejected him when he didn't even offer himself to them as Messiah? I mean, that's heresy, folks. But cult leaders, when they follow somebody, it ain't the truth they're after. I can't explain it. How can you get tied up in a cult and not see the destruction of it? How can you deny the deity of God like Don K. Preston does and still follow that man? He denies God can do whatever he wants. He's God. The Bible does tell us it's impossible for God to lie. And when Don said in that video, the first time I watched it, I thought, when he said, there is some things God can't do, and I thought, yeah, he can't lie. But then he goes off, he cannot make a square circle. I thought, well, how ridiculous. I don't know. in multiple dimensions, wherever God is, whatever it is, uh, that requires of him to be able to do whatever he wants. Who are we to challenge him? Where was we when we said, God, you can't just speak this universe into existence? Where were we? Why, Don's saying he cannot raise the dead. John the Baptist said Jesus is capable of raising these stones to be sons of Abraham if he wants to. And here you are, God cannot violate the laws of physics. Folks, if that don't turn you away from that doctrine, I don't know what would. I don't. I really don't. No matter what the resurrection is, I personally don't believe this body of mine is what's going to be, this physical body is what's going to be raised. I have a spiritual body that God's going to give me someday. Will it look like this? I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? I think we'll know each other. That's all. But it has not been revealed to us yet what we shall be. But when he is revealed, we will know that we will be like him. 1 John chapter 3, I think is where it's at. 1 John, look it up for yourself. It's either in chapter 1, 2, or 3. But Jesus will be revealed when he returns. Then we will know we'll be like him. That's what I want. That's my resurrection that I'm hoping for, that the Bible teaches. And I hope this nasty, sinful, filthy world will be destroyed as promised. Don them say heaven and earth is not heaven and earth. It's something else. See, if God cannot violate the laws of physics, you got to change everything. And that's the standpoint. Okay, what is God? Or who is God? Can I know God? Don starts out with, well, God is limited to the laws of physics. He cannot violate his own laws. So therefore, it's stupid. The scholarly term for what does that mean is stupidity. And, I don't know no other way of putting it. I really don't. Because if we have our faith is built on, the evidence of our faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, things we cannot see. We cannot challenge God on how are you going to do this? This is impossible. You can't do this. Well, you can look it up for yourself, folks, and I don't know how to explain it, but physicists can show you how in a certain dimensions, I think fifth or sixth or whatever, I read it once before that they can turn a basketball inside out without it breaking it. Who would want to do that? But that can be done. So explain that, Don. Since you're a physicist, maybe that's part of your doctorate. You're a physicist. But let me know what you think, folks, on that. Matthew 27. Uh, that's Matthew 27. What do you think about Hymenaeus and Philetus? They saw some of these dead saints. Maybe they might have saw or might have had people tell them, that these people came out of the graves, came into the city, and it was after Jesus' resurrection, and so they're going around teaching. To me, that's the best explanation of how could they have taught the day of the Lord had come and the resurrection was past. Paul's teaching the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 15, you have a resurrection to look forward to. And if you deny the resurrection, or if you say it's already past, then you have died. Your belief is in vain. Jesus was the first fruit. He resurrected, showing us that we will be resurrected. And he will present his church to the Father. His kingdom, he calls it. Jesus calls us the kingdom. And he will present his kingdom to the Father. That's all in chapter 15 of 1 Corinthians. Read it. And then it goes over the bodies. Okay, what kind of body will we have? And Paul says, what you bury is not what will be raised. And if we are still alive when he returns, this body will be changed. It will put off mortality and put on immortality. Whatever that is, whatever that means. Like I said, John already told us, it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. Look at this, folks. These hyper-preterists teach that the church in Corinth, the day the temple fell in Jerusalem, all of a sudden, in the twinkling of an eye, it was revealed to them what they shall be. Why didn't any of them write about it? Why didn't any of them tell us what it was like the day of the Lord, the resurrection? Why didn't they tell us what it felt like or anything? Nobody wrote about it. None of them. Not a single one of them wrote about what it was like to be resurrected from the dead. I mean, just, oh, foolish one who has deceived you. But I think that's all I got for today, folks. But that Carolyn last night reminded me of how important it is to study the Bible. She follows Don K. Preston. I told her what he said. Oh, he misspoke. He doesn't believe that. He didn't say that. I've got the video clip. I saved it and I've posted it on several boards that Don didn't block me from. But he stands by it. You know, God cannot violate the laws of physics. Therefore, there will not be a resurrection. There's just too many atoms, or not enough atoms to go around. I mean, good grief, how in scholarly terms, again, I say that is very, very stupid. But anyway, that's all I got for today, folks. I might put a song in here that I hadn't played you in a while. Go to my channel, Tim Russell Music, YouTube channel, Tim Russell Music. And I'll try to remember to put a link up on it. Subscribe to it, and I'm going to be putting more songs up there as I get them written.
The TV,
well, thank you for listening. I'll see y'all next time.
Close. Outside it's raining, the wind is blowing cold. As long as I can see the stars in your eyes tonight, we'll make our own moonlight. A few warm kisses, some old love songs, turn on some music, unplug the phone. Let's build a fire like we did on that first night. We'll make our own moonlight. Let's fall in love again like we did on that first night. Our eyes were full of stars and the moon was shining bright. Let's build a fire like we did on the first night. Let's make our